Long story short, Pete's a phenomenal person, great, amazing human, and also a very seasoned and expert venture investor.
Okay, and there he is. Welcome, Pete. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Hello, hello.
So quick schedule, so we'll get right into it. So how this is going to work is the startup will pitch for 10 minutes. Then they will have a 10-minute Q&A directly with Pete. Investors, if you have questions, save them until after. This is for Pete to ask questions, for you to observe. And then the startup will leave the room, and then the investors, you'll have 10 minutes with Pete to talk about why he asked certain questions about the pitch, things like that. And we're on a tight schedule, so please keep to that. / I won't give you the microphone if it's not your turn. And everyone who's on Zoom, if you're not Pete, please mute until it's time for your Q&A, just so we don't get any feedback here in the hot house. So if everyone is good to go, Adam, you've got 10 minutes as soon as you start talking.
Okay, cool. Pleasure to meet you, Pete, and people in the audience who I haven't met yet. My name's Adam Steger, and I'm the founder and CEO of TRIC Robotics. And we're helping farmers control pest and disease using ultraviolet light as a replacement for the chemical pesticides. And this is enabling farmers to grow healthier plants with less chemicals. Okay. Now, I probably don't have to tell everybody that we spray a lot of chemicals on our food. And unfortunately, it's not the fact that we're spraying chemicals that's the problem so much as the fact that these chemicals aren't working anymore. So first of all, due to resistances, the chemicals have become less effective. And then due to regulatory pressure, especially in places like California, where we are, and Europe, the regulatory pressure is making them unavailable. Now, this combined with an increasing cost and limited availability of the labor to do these sprays is kind of the perfect storm that's making it very difficult for the farmers to grow our food. And now that's not just a problem for the farmers, it's a big problem for our food supply. Fortunately, we have a solution. And that solution is light. And it's a technology that was developed for over a decade in the lab, and it uses something called UVC light. Now, that's a light that is naturally occurring. It's emitted by our sun, but then normally blocked by our atmosphere. But by recreating that light on Earth, we get a natural and resistance-free pest control that is more effective than chemical pesticides. You can see right here from this image, we get visibly healthier plants by using light in place of chemicals. What was really interesting this year is we used a spectrum called NDVI that scientists use to quantify the health of plants via satellites. And we saw bands of improvement in our section compared to where the farmer was using chemical, due largely from these problems, the resistances to these chemicals. Now, in order to achieve these results in the field, our team at TRIC Robotics has developed unique technologies around UV light and a unique platform called Luna. And this is Luna. It's a tractor-sized robot that drives up and down the rows, carrying these lights as a replacement for chemical pesticides. I like to think of it like a giant Roomba for the farm. And the reason I say that is because you drop it off at the beginning of the season, and then it manages a section of that field all season long. Because it's autonomous, it helps deal with that labor challenge. And because it operates at night, it's not in the way of the daily field operations for the farmer. Now, our team at TRIC has already won over $2 million in grant funding to develop unique technologies to take this from the lab and bring it to the farm. Some of those technologies include the UV light arrays themselves. And what we've done there is improved the coverage, so how much we can cover with a single lamp, and also the amount of penetration we get under the canopy. Dosing is what's really important here. So basically, we can get good penetration where the pests are under the leaves, but at the right amounts of light. So we've developed, in order to achieve those right amounts, we've developed a platform from the ground up. So we've developed all the automation in the platform itself, so we can control the speed and the height of the lights. So you've probably seen farms, it looks pretty flat generally, but actually there's a lot of uncertainty in the field. So we've developed the automation technologies to level these lights to make sure that they stay the right height above the plants. Now, of course, as you can probably tell, there is a lot of tech under the hood for a solution like this. And you can imagine it would be pretty daunting to give a quite expensive tractor-sized robot to a farmer and then have them try to learn and get trained on all these new technologies. So what we've done is really dropped the barrier to entry here. For them, it's simply a pest control service. So like I was saying before, they allocate a section of field where they want to run UV light in place of their chemicals. And we come, we set up that farm, and then we operate this platform all season long. The robot looks something like this, and it covers 50 acres per robot. And that 50 acres generates $200,000 a year in recurring revenue for us. And what's amazing for the farmer is we already have a line item in their budget that they spend on chemical pesticides, and they spend this every single month. They're doing these sprays. So they pay us the same way they would normally do the sprays. So although there is a big technology component here, it's not a huge lift in terms of how it actually operates on the farm. In fact, it reduces the amount of farm management they have to do because we take these operations off of their plate and we do it at night, so it's not in the way of their other operations. Now, to give you an idea of what a customer looks like, this is one of our existing customers, Berries. They farm 800 acres. And to achieve coverage on this farm, we would have 16 robots running in this field, and this would generate $3.2 million in recurring revenue. And what's really cool here is by leveraging the autonomy piece, we, although have a hardware component to this, we can achieve SaaS-like or software as a service-like margins. So that's one of the reasons why autonomy really makes sense with a technology like this on the farm. Now, in terms of the market size, as I said, we spray a lot of chemicals on our farms. In the US, farmers are spending about $15 billion every single year on chemicals to control pest and disease. And this UV light can be used on just about any crop to some capacity. But that's a huge market, and we're laser focused on our first market, which is strawberries. And we're focused on strawberries because they not only spend $250 million on pest controls that we can replace, but strawberries is actually a very dense market that uses more chemicals on their fruit than any other fruit or vegetable. So it's a great place with a burning problem to solve. And what's really great about this market is it's geographically dense as well. So we see 90% of strawberries in the US market, which is the second largest strawberry market in the world. 90% of them are grown within a drivable distance of right here in SLO. So we can have a headquarters here and provide this service to many of these farms. Unlike other crops where you may have to travel across thousands of miles across the US, we can start here and address most of this market. And we're already starting to do that. We're working with some of the largest strawberry farms in the world. And our approach is to have a land and expand strategy. The farmers that we have already working with us represent about 20% of that market. That's a $50 million opportunity. And by land and expanding on these farms, it means we don't have to build our marketing and sales team as aggressively early on, and we can get a really good foundation for the company. Now, if you look at this plot, this is kind of how our growth has evolved since we got here. Half-acre plots in 2021 where the farmer wasn't sure if this would even work on the farm. We got it out of the lab. We showed this line in the sand where it was better, healthier plants in our section. And farmers have been doubling down since we started with them in 2021. I'm really proud to say that this year we did over 100 acres with our farmers, paid acres. And what was amazing is these farmers used 40% less chemicals than they used without our solution. And that's really incredible because I think this is a solution that can take strawberries completely off of what's called the dirty dozen, the dirtiest crops for chemical use. And the reason we've been able to get so much traction is we're the only company in the world that can deploy a UV solution commercially. And UV is the most reliable chemical-free pest control on the market. And we've been able to achieve that because we've combined our UV technologies with our unique platform, Luna. So we're able to control the dosing and effectively deliver this technology in the field. Now, it's also resistance-free, which is extremely important. Compared to chemicals that become less effective over time, our technology does not become less effective, and it's sustainable because it's chemical-free. That means, of course, unlike chemicals, we can provide a healthier work environment for the field workers, for the consumers like you and I who are eating this food, and we can do it without damaging the environment. Now, to give you an idea of our growth strategy, this chemical replacement is really the tip of the spear for us. This is getting the automation on the farm. And in strawberries alone, just in California, we see a clear path to $100 million in recurring revenue. However, there are directions we can grow from here. First, we can grow into new crops, so we can start expanding. In California alone, we see great crops like grapes and other berries that we can go to. But the idea is to automate as much of the farm as possible. And to do that, we can start using that platform that's already driving over these plants to collect data and add new capabilities. We're charging $500 per month per acre with our pest control, and there's a 10x revenue opportunity from here by adding new capabilities to the platforms in strawberry alone. The reason we've been able to get so much traction with these farmers is we've really been in the dirt a lot. Our team is a team of 3 engineers. That's our core team. I think that was a great place to start because we could all work on the platform and work with the customers. However, we've really started to build our team around not just the engineering, but also the agriculture and pest control expertise and the business expertise. People like Sage and Fumi with decades of experience and relationships that they can bring to our team. And people like Gordon, Scott, and John who've built companies and launched products globally. So now we're seeking $1 million, and we're seeking that money because we want to scale up. This year we had 15 farmers interested and only 4 robots to deploy. So we've got the market pull. We want to get to $1 million run rate by the end of this year and cover 500 acres by expanding our team to meet that demand from the customer. Now I'd be happy to answer any questions and excited to hear what you think, Pete.
So super interesting. Thank you for that. What's the kill rate of pests as you make a pass over this?
So in the lab, we show that we can completely kill the pest in a petri dish. And in the field, we show that we get better kill rate than the chemicals. That's why you get this visible difference. However, in ag, there's a biology component to this. So the kill rate does vary depending on the field.
Okay, so you're at least as good as current pesticides from a kill rate point of view.
Yes, exactly. In fact, we've collected data over hundreds of acres since we started, and we get plots that look the same every time. It's either equal control or better control, and more often better than equal.
And how does the cost compare to using pesticides?
Well, we can replace their current costs and still achieve 80% margins on our end because we have this autonomy component.
So you're trying to go to market with equal cost.
I think, yes, that's the way we want to launch. Now, as we scale up, we're going to add value to that platform. We do want this to be value-based over time, but this is the easiest, lowest barrier to entry to start.
I assume you've talked to several farmers. What pushback have you gotten? Who hasn't said yes and why?
So some of the more, I don't want to say entrenched, but the farmers who've been there a long time. So some of the farmers who've been spraying these chemicals since their grandfather's grandfather was running the farm. The challenge has been showing this market acceptance and getting to enough acres where they believe it works, because it's scary to say, don't spray that thing you've been spraying this whole time. And that's what we're doing now. We're starting to get to over 100 acres just last year, and this year we'll be doing several hundred acres. So we're really debunking any doubt that the farmer has that this can work.
So how quickly would a given farmer, he says, okay, I'm going to try you. How quickly will he get clear evidence that you're at least as good as his pesticides?
It takes about a month before you can see the results. So we start in the beginning of the season, and then we run for that first month, and then we're collecting data that entire time. So you can start to see the results there, but we've been running across entire seasons and collecting data. So it's not just that month, and we've always asked the farmers to pay.
Okay. Well, what I'm more interested in is from a sales point of view, if somebody tried it on a small portion of their farm, obviously they're concerned that you have a 0 kill rate and that their crop is about to, succumb to pest. How quickly they can see that it's working would suggest how quickly they're going to buy more acres.
Oh, I understand. So market acceptance is one of these things where you start to get this dynamic in this market where you see the farmers start to adopt, and then other farmers kind of jump on that bandwagon. They don't need to start from like a half-acre plot anymore. For example, this year we had a farmer that jumped straight to 25 acres, and after seeing results on that plot in the summer, they did the entire plot. So it was a 30-acre section. They didn't even ask for a control anymore. And we had previously never worked with that farmer.
What is limiting your growth? This seems like an extremely impressive solution. Why aren't you growing, 3 times as fast?
Pete, if you can help me with the CapEx.
Okay.
So the challenge is that the robots are tractor scale piece of equipment. So it's hard to take, for example, like $1 million in equity and only get a couple of robots that you can deploy. So
Yeah.
what we've been doing is we've been starting to work with banks to get debt so that we can finance the equipment. And we want to use that debt financing to grow, build up our assets. But if you did this in a snowballing fashion where you pay the robot off and then you use the profits to buy the next robot, of course, when you only have a couple of robots, that's pretty slow growth trajectory.
Yeah. So along that lines, how long does it take, if you deploy $1 million into net new capital, how soon before you generate $1 million in free cash flow and basically pay back that robot?
We can, if we run the robots aggressively, basically run them every single day, we can pay off the robot in a year.
Okay.
However, since we don't have that many robots and we're starting out, we've been running 2 out of every 3 days, which gives us a little bit more time to work with the farmer to collect that data. And that's not something we would need to do in the long term. So I think a year would be the target for that.
Okay. But today it's probably closer to a year and a half, but you're
About a year and a half. Yeah.
Okay.
That's where we're sitting today. And the robots, I mean, this is not something that goes bad after a couple of years.
Yeah.
We see tractors lasting 20 years. We expect a 10-year life out of components like the generator. So you can imagine getting a 10x of ROI as a company on that asset.
So what percent of the cost are the UVC LEDs? I assume you're using LEDs here or using xenon bulbs? What are you using to generate the UV?
We're using mercury bulbs, so they're a
Okay.
pretty established technology around the lamp itself. And the lamps are about 10% of the cost of the robot.
Okay. And what kind of lifetime are you getting on the lamps?
Lamps have a 10,000-hour life.
Okay.
That would extrapolate to about a 10-year life on the robot, on the lamp. And that's similar to the generator itself.
Okay. Is there any belief that over time you could, run a robot on a different field during part of the day and obviously that creates some problems for the farmer, but it gives you the ability to get faster payback on your equipment?
I like to think of them as solutions because I believe as a PhD in robotics, I believe we can automate a lot of the farm. And by doing that, we would actually decrease the complexity because you can imagine today they have 40 people doing a task that once automated can be done by just a couple of robots, especially at our scale.
Okay. Who on the team has deep background in selling into the farmer market, if you will?
Sage Finch is a crop consultant. We didn't have this expertise when we came. We were learning a lot from the farmers when we started. But we brought our technologies to the trade shows. There's ones that are specific to strawberries, which is a really great way to get to these farmers, but also a great way to get to experts like the ones you're talking about. Sage Finch is a PCA that's been in this market for decades. He knows the farmers to the point where he'll go skiing with them. So he has these deep relationships with these farmers, and he's a crop consultant across thousands of acres. So he's very familiar with selling into these farms. He brought 2 new customers to us this past year, including the one I mentioned earlier that jumped straight to 25 acres.
Okay. You didn't talk much about competition other than pesticides, obviously. Are there other people, looking at UV or equipment-based solutions here?
Yeah, there are other companies that are starting to get into the field with this technology. But there's a main difference here. They've taken kind of off-the-shelf lights and added it to what would be called a modular platform. And by doing that, the unit economics do not scale. We actually started with a small platform ourselves, and we learned that you really need to scale this platform up, and you need to have extremely efficient lamps in there. And so our IP is around the lighting device we've made and the dosing controller so that we can be efficient in the field. And we've developed the platform itself, which can carry multiple lights across multiple rows. And the innovation there is as you're driving through the farm, if you're on a single row, you don't have to adjust as much. But if you're covering many rows, you really have a lot more adjustment in the field. And frankly, scaling up from an electric system that you'd see in a PhD lab to a tractor with hydraulics, the automation there is also a fairly large hurdle for companies.
I should hand it back to the room.
That's our 10 minutes of Q&A between Pete and the startup. So we will ask Adam to leave, and then we'll have 10 minutes of Q&A between Pete and the investors. So
Thanks,
thank you,
Pete.
Adam.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, so online, if you have a question, please raise your hand, use the reaction or unmute, and then in the room, raise your hand and Judy will throw you the catch box and you can throw it. It's indestructible.
Judy. Oh, yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'm Paul Stoltz. And the question, I had a two-part question. First part of the question was, how are these machines powered, these robots? Oh, there is back
Oh.
there.
Adam, do you want to answer that before you?
Yeah, how are the robots powered? So, and you have these panels that have these lights, right?
So, okay, so we can totally answer these questions, but so the way we were thinking this would go,
Is that an out-of-bounds question?
it's more questions to Pete
Oh,
to,
sorry,
to
Pete.
to talk about the investment opportunity and what his thoughts are regarding the
Oh,
investment
okay,
opportunity.
pardon me. You're
Later
You're
too,
done.
so.
Okay, so
great.
we
I've
can
got a bunch of
circle back
questions for
with
you.
the startup founders right after this session. So
Yeah,
Adam, please
cool.
stick around if you can.
Cool.
You've got a room full of investors, and then you guys are, of course, free to keep asking questions to Adam after this session. Yeah.
More interesting than
I don't know. You're pretty interesting.
Okay,
Um,
thanks, Adam. Well, so stick around. Okay, cool. Thank you. So here, yeah, we'll wait for Adam to leave. And here's more to get Pete's perspective on what he thoughts about what he thinks about the opportunity.
Yep,
And kind of hashing it out, the pros
great.
and cons.
So Pete, what do you see as the biggest potential obstacle or barrier or threat to them achieving their business model?
First off, I'd say I'm pretty compelled. I thought that was a very nice presentation. I would want to do more due diligence on several facets, but this was a very strong presentation. Some of the risks, I would want to understand the relationship that Sage has in more depth, because the world's best technology still has to be sold. And it seems like the team comes at this from a technical perspective. And often the flaw you run into is, engineers just implicitly think, and I'm one myself, implicitly think, great technology sells itself. And that's just not the case. Sales is equally as challenging as coming up with the original solution. So I would really want to understand, do they understand the go-to-market? Do they understand that the pesticide guy is not only skiing with them, but he's, doing a kickback somehow? Really understand that go-to-market, to me, is likely the biggest risk. There are several other risks, but that's probably the number one that I would see.
Great, thank you.
Jesse Dunn here. So Pete, what are your thoughts on kind of how they're approaching at least in this pitch, the financial side of it? I mean, they've got that 80% gross margin, but you keyed in on the capital expense. And I didn't think they were really talking much about the maintenance costs or like deploying. Do they have one of these things breaks down at midnight because they're running at midnight and they're 100 miles away or 200 miles away? Like, how are they getting somebody out there? What's the cost associated with that? I think like maybe those are below the gross margin line, but it seemed a little nebulous. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
By the way, that's the kind of thing I would want to dive into in due diligence, is understanding exactly what you just talked about, a midnight breakage, what happens and how does that affect your numbers? The central thing, though, to me, that you really ought to figure out on this business is what are the capital needs of the business? And it comes back to this notion of how fast can you pay back the incremental robot. Eventually, once the company is more proven, they'll be able to debt finance that piece of it. But I don't think they're going to be able to debt finance from any traditional lending source the capital equipment in the near term. And that means they have to use very expensive equity. So I would have to get my hands around that because ultimately what we're looking for are companies that can have very impressive sustained growth rates without consuming massive amounts of capital over time. I'm not sure whether that's possible, given the need to deploy capital into building these robots. he didn't talk much about. I would assume the robots could go down in cost as he starts to hit volume, maybe not this year, but 2, 3, 4 years from now. So maybe if you can cut the overall cost per robot in half over time, that can greatly speed up the payback cycle. I would really want to understand the pricing. Like if today they're coming in at parity with pesticides for pricing, but if they had to undercut pesticides to get into the market, that's going to extend that payback cycle. And a year and a half is about as long as you could even conceive of for for a startup on significant amounts of capital in the business. But that's the biggest question in my mind, is getting your hands around that.
Hey, this is Drew Verano. I'm new to the group the past month or so, but yeah, I guess the main question I had was like, how well does this, truly address the problem of like increasing yield and not using pesticides? Like, I personally would have loved to see more proof points of, okay, we implemented this and within a month, like here's the numbers of what happened compared to the control or the non, implemented part of the crops. Like, how do you think about like how much you want to see, those proof points in the initial pitch versus, I guess, wait for due diligence, like you mentioned?
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to assess in the first pitch is just kind of, if everything he says is true, is it an interesting proposition, and therefore I should do more diligence. I agree with you. That is a key risk area, and I would want to see substantial data, but I would take care of that in a subsequent meeting. So I thought he did a fine job for the first meeting. He probably should have had at least one chart in there showing real data on efficacy versus pesticides. But I was sort of accepting what he said on the surface, because he did refer to having done side-by-side tests within a farm and being able to visually see the difference. He did refer to some farmers trying them, and then as they saw that it worked, starting to grow with them. So I accept on the surface that it probably works, but you're right, we got to see more data.
Okay, great. This is really great. So this is exactly, sorry, we're gonna have to move on to the next startup, and this is one last question, David.
Pete, I was wondering if you felt comfortable in his presentation that there was a competitive advantage, a durable competitive advantage, the metaphorical moat.
So versus pesticides, yes. Versus other startups, not so much. By coincidence, I happen to have spent a fair amount of time in how to use UVC to kill other pathogens in other non-farm applications. So I'm pretty familiar with the go-to-market on that and the technical issues. They're being used to clean up after you leave a hospital room. They bring in these giant xenon lamps that kill the bugs in the hospital room, things like that. So I think other people can and will compete over time. I don't see a particular advantage, but momentum and getting out there and building a name for yourself, that alone can get you a pretty substantial foothold in the market. So I think just being first and moving fast could be a form of advantage here. Not sustainable in the long term, though.
Thanks, Pete. Thank you. So these are all great questions. Super relevant that you asked questions where Pete was like, okay, on the surface, yes, good pitch. Let's dig in. I want to learn more. And then you all followed up with some great due diligence type questions, which would be the questions you're going to be asking in this round of AngelCon, right? Once we pick our top 6. So next company.
Whoever's talking, just hold it.
Okay.
Hold it.
All right, we're switching things up a little bit. We're going to use the catch box just to be part of the team here. So my name is Jim Kogan. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of AcreCloud. AcreCloud is a software as a service farm management company. We build farm management tools. Our primary product right at the moment is Acre Manager, and we had the fortune of winning AngelCon back in 2022, and then we went out and talked with some investors, and we had really just started the company when we went through AngelCon, and the feedback that we got from investors was really, you're not quite there yet to come and talk with us about investment. So we've spent the last 2 years really building the company up and have a MVP that we're excited to bring out to the market, which is actually our 2.0. And then we've done all of the less sexy things of putting together a dynamic pro forma that really puts together our sales plan. But I want to tell you a little bit more about how the Acre Manager product became a product. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to our Chief Operating Officer, Elias Cabrera.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks, Jim. A lot of going on that slide, but the gist of it is that sixth-generation farmer, engineer by trade, but my family has an engineering curse where we're all engineers and we all end up farming, right? So we haven't been able to break that cycle as of yet. 13 years ago, I pretty much went from farmhand to taking over the reins of my family's farming operations, and also custom farming for other families within the Central Valley. We got the chance to farm row crops, permanent crops, both here in the U.S. and in Mexico. So I've had to make a lot of decisions, most of them very, very difficult, based on killing a crop and destroying the whole entire family farm, right? So haven't done that in 13 years, so I think I got a good track record going there. But that's also led to the problem of every single decision is complex on a farm. Okay, there's every decision you make affects something down the line, and something that you're not going to know the outcome of for another 4, 5, 6 months, or even a year, right? So it's basically the Las Vegas standard, but you don't know if you won until 6 months down the road. Okay, and in those complexities, there's 3 very important problems, right? There's the margins and profitability, which we've seen go down over the course of the last couple of years, right? As inputs increase, water cost increases, the value of our crops is actually decreased. And you'll see that in permanent crops, especially pistachios, almonds, grapes, and stuff like that. Table grapes used to be a great crop for people in California, not anymore. Almonds, we're seeing a bunch of almond farmers go under and file for bankruptcy recently. I'll throw one name out there because it's public now. Trinitas Farming, which is a PE-backed farm, just filed for bankruptcy this last month, and you're talking 7,000 acres of PE-backed almonds, right? And that's because we're price takers, we're not price givers. So we can farm as efficiently as we can and still lose at the end of the day, right? If you go back really quick, Jim. The other thing is that as the years have gone by, compliance has become a key factor in our operations, right? There's not a single operation that we do on the farm that isn't controlled in one way or form by a state or federal agency. Okay, so at the state level, and specifically when it comes to labor, we are up a creek because it requires 2 to 3 staff members per farm employee to remain compliant, right? So it's taking me 3 skilled employees to manage 1 unskilled employee. It's unfathomable. In addition to that, we see resource management. The cost of equipment is getting more and more expensive. The cost of repairs is getting more expensive. Again, compliance. Our long-term planning now has to take into account the cost of capital, the cost of water, the cost of ground, and ultimately the cost of human capital, right? Then we go into the external factors that we are not in control of, which is the contractors that we bring onto the farm that manage those services, right? So like in this case, on this side, we have an example of farm labor contractors, which are our greatest risk, because in the state of California, we are joint employers. So anything that farm labor contractor does comes back to the farmer as a risk. right? So the labor planning, the billing accuracy, and the contract profitability is very, very important to us, right? On the laborer side, the most vulnerable people in this equation, inaccurate wages, because of an antiquated payroll system, and also the cost of getting their cash, right? Most of these people don't have bank accounts, so they rely on the grocery store cash checking locations or at very, very expensive check cashing outlets, right? So we've developed a program, a platform that solves a lot of these issues. And I'll hand it back to Jim so you can hand it from here.
Well, so we've created the Farm Manager platform really as a way to have a one-stop shop for scheduling labor and for accurately paying your laborers and then ensuring that you are meeting all of the regulatory compliance needs. In fact, one of the other things that we're hoping to do, and we're going to show you what our new MVP looks like in the next slide, and Elias is going to walk you through that, but one of the goals is to be a go-to-market strategy for people like Adam with TRIC Robotics, because you'll be able to schedule TRIC right through AcreCloud.
So I'm actually really, really proud of this slide because it's a long way from where we started. I mean, what you're going to see here in a few seconds is decades ahead of where we started, which looked like MS-DOS, pretty much. You know, so as we start, and I'll speak a little to it, we've revamped our whole entire user interface. We've made it easier to use based on feedback from some of our largest clients. We've been working with our clients for the last couple of years, and one of their key feedback to us was that having a native application was very, very important to them because of the lack of cell service out in the field. And we needed to store data on the device to be able to push that into the cloud as we went forward. As you'll see here, this is a very simple example of a small portion of the platform, and this is generating a work order. So in our platform, everything runs under a work order because no matter what we're doing on the farm, that direction is given at some point in time, right? We're just capturing that via a work order, which in the future turns into a financially positive transaction, right? Because with everything that we do on a farm, there's a dollar number associated with that. So we're just capturing that transaction to then monetize it later in the future, okay? Okay, so yeah, so in the video, the next step you're gonna see is that they ordered labor. It communicated how many individuals were gonna be required to do a job. 2, it was gonna show what those individuals were gonna make. And then the system was gonna auto-calculate all the safety requirements that need to take place for that specific number of employees. It was also gonna generate the costs associated with that job, and give the grower, in this case, someone like myself, the opportunity to say, okay, that works within my current budget, or I have a little bit of room to up the number of employees I need to finish at a quicker rate, okay? So 1, it's helping me associate the cost to my budget, and 2, maximize the budget that I have with the resources that I have.
So we covered the why now in Elias's description. This is our target market, pretty simple. The largest, one of the largest growing areas in the country is right in the Central Valley, and we've got great access to folks through Elias's experience and his 6 generations of farming. We talk about our competitors a little bit. This is really focused more on our payroll aspect, and you can see that some of these other companies have a small piece of what is the full crop cycle and access to the ag industry, but AcreCloud is really poised to have the best competition or to compete the best in that world. from our revenue model, it's very simple. It's $12 per acre per year, which is less than 0.5% of the budget that most of our farmers have per acre. This is our team. You've met both of us. Our Chief Technology Officer, Victor Lara, is a programmer and the architect of the original AcreCloud platform. He's an analyst over at UC Marcid. And then George Castillo is our Chief Creative Officer. Where we're at right now, we have about 400 daily users on about 500,000 acres of ag land. These are freemium users, and we have a plan in place for converting them and getting to a significant annual revenue in the coming years. This is a little bit more of how our financial projections base out. One of the things that we had heard as feedback originally was that our hockey stick looked a little too aggressive. And so we've really built, as I had mentioned before, this dynamic pro forma that puts in a full sales team. And so you get to a place where, we've got some additional funding needs.
Jim, I've got to cut you off because you reached your 10 minutes.
Okay.
Which is great because this will happen on March 1. If this does happen, we will cut the startups off because it's a long day.
And
So
we're right
now,
there.
perfect. So we are going to do 10 minutes. Pete, go ahead and ask your questions.
Thanks, guys. It seems like you have quite a few functionalities built within your software. I'm curious, are all of the functionalities you refer to present in the current version of the software, or you'll roll that out over time, or?
Yeah, Pete. So everything that we discussed in the pitch deck is actually currently functional. The capturing of budgets, the capturing and scheduling of on-farm services are all currently available to users at the moment.
Okay, and on some of these, like when you showed the competitive slide, you happen to mention ADP up there, a company that most small businesses know well. ADP has quite a range of functionality that you did not refer to, such as benefits management. Do you offer all those other functionalities that ADP would claim they offer?
So where ADP fits as a competitor with us is the simple processing of payroll. Right, a lot of the payroll that we're looking to manage going forward is field labor related, which they don't expect benefits, they don't expect time off, none of that. It's just their hourly wage times the hours that they worked.
Okay, so i.e., you're saying you don't need it.
Correct. And really, Pete, what we're focused on is ag laborers, although they're treated from a regulatory standpoint, they're treated like 40-hour-a-week employees, and that's the way it's regulated for growers. They actually operate more like 1099 employees. So that's really where the comparison is for us, is that we're trying to provide a solution that meets the regulatory requirements of California, but accurately recognizes they're more like 1099 employees.
Okay. And do you have any non-1099 employees on your farm?
Yeah, so I have non-1099s in addition to 1099s. But the reason that we're handling the farm labor as a pseudo 1099 is because these individuals work one day with me, another day with another grower, and then possibly come back at the end of the week. So because they are generating wages across multiple growers, we have to be able to capture those hours across those multiple growers to make sure that their payroll is correct.
You mentioned labor check cashing, that apparently there's a benefit to the laborer here. I certainly understand the potential for that, but it seems to me that that's an entirely different face of the solution.
Yeah.
Why go into that? Isn't that just adding complexity to what you're trying to do?
So yes, the short answer is yes, that does add complexity. But we're looking for that complexity at this point because that's a differentiator, right? We want to be able to track their time and also pay the employee, which then generates acceptance on that level. Because when it comes to on-farm payroll, if you can if you can capture the hourly employee at the very bottom, that is a direct entrance to the farm. Because one, there's already a lack of or a scarcity of that labor. So if you're processing payroll for that labor, your ability to access a farm that you currently don't do business with is very, very high.
You glanced over the market size slide. Can you just in very broad terms say how big the market is here?
So across the nation, which is our ultimate goal, obviously not short term, but you're looking at about $500 billion for the market size.
That seems much too large. I don't buy that.
Yeah, and that like I said, that's across the entire nation in terms of payrolls processed.
Yeah. Oh, okay. That's the size of the payroll.
Correct.
But what is your revenue opportunity?
So what we're trying to capture in that is 2% of the payroll, and then also a 2% on transactions. That's also going to come later on down the road, and that's where the real money starts to come in. Our initial $12 per acre per year, that's our day-to-day financing, if you will. Very, very cheap.
But over time, you want to make money as a percent of payroll?
Percent of payroll and a percent of transactions.
And is the percent of payroll how ADP charges today?
No, they charge by employee.
Yeah, so ADP has a two-step, right? It's a per employee and then a percentage for processing the payroll.
Okay. Is it comparable in total?
So no, if you were to run ADP on your farm with the number of employees that we have to come through, it would not be feasible.
It'd be too expensive.
Way too expensive.
Well, and one other thing for you to know, Pete, we're looking at 2% of payroll, which is actually a huge cost reduction for FLCs and for growers, because their cost for payroll right now is about 6%. So we would be reducing their cost by 2/3.
And so you're pre-revenue right now, or you're just going into revenue?
Yeah, we're just going into revenue.
Okay. Has anybody said, yes, I'm willing to pay?
Yeah, so we're going to be the first clients or customers that we're transitioning have agreed to pay. We have not yet charged them until they transition into the new platform.
Okay. Well, I'll stop there. Good luck, guys. This is very interesting.
All right. Thanks, Pete.
Thank you, AcreCloud. So we'll wait for them to leave, and then investors, you'll have a chance to talk to Pete.
And you can come back for quantum. Jim, Elias, if you're interested, you can come back for quantum. Okay. So Andrew's here for our next presentation, but before that, we have another 10 minutes here with Pete. No, Andrew, please stay. We're encouraging Adam's here as well, just to listen to, okay, now our investors are going to ask Pete, what is it that you would be looking for once you're in due diligence mode, if you were doing due diligence on this type of startup that just pitched? So we'll open it up to the investors in the room. Any questions?
Or online.
Or online, I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry, I forgot about the online people. So Pete, just to start off the conversation, so did this pique your interest? If yes, why? If no, why not?
So clearly there's a need here, but I left a bit confused as to which problems they're really solving. It feels to me like they're solving way too many problems, and at the very least, they need to have a time-ordered procedure for how they're getting into it. What we backed into at the very end of the presentation was that their beachhead is really this payroll management. Sounds like where they're really starting things. But along the way, he mentioned vendor management, compliance, planning, this whole notion of labor check cashing. And so I'm a little confused why they're trying to do all of that, especially in a version 1 of the product. I think you could do all of that over the life of the product. But to start, you got to have a very well-defined beachhead. Clearly there's need here. I accept that. I would want to get much clearer from them. What does the product really do today? Why did you start there? What is the plan for adding functionality over time? But you can't execute on multiple fronts all at once.
Yeah, I think that used to be in their pitch deck, Pete. That's interesting, and I
Okay.
think they're making this assumption that okay, we've been doing this for 3 years, and everyone knows what we're doing, but that is a mistake. So originally it was for labor management. That was the major pain point that Elias felt directly. I shouldn't be
Okay.
answering this question, sorry, but I can't help it because we've been working with them for so long. But then they saw the financial opportunity for the software in the payment systems and that's where there's a financial opportunity for them to grow as a startup and to actually create something. So they went from AcreCloud to AcrePay because that's where the opportunity is to actually make money. Yeah.
But I just want to fall back on that issue is I think one of the challenges for any company, both in raising money and when presenting themselves, selling their solution to a farmer is, for the most part, both investors and, you got to assume nobody knows anything about you.
Yeah.
And you got to start back by defining what's the value proposition today.
Right. And we have a question here. Thanks, Pete. Yeah.
So one question I always have about these sort of digitalization plays, right, is to what degree is the market ready to do that? What is your strategy for actually getting people to adopt a digital solution when they're not using something like that already? I'm curious, is that something that you also think about when you, like, am I just sensitive to that because of my background, or is that something that you're thinking about from an investor standpoint?
Yeah, especially in a market like this, which I don't have any real familiarity with on the ground farming. I would want to go talk specifically to, the end community, both people they put me in touch with and people that I find on my own to better understand that. Like it sounds like you probably know the market somewhat, but like, I don't really know. I assume all farmers have their phone with them 24/7, but I don't know what sort of data connectivity you have in a field or whether whether you pull that thing out and you're willing to put data in while you're in the field.
Mm-hmm.
I assume that's true, but it depends on the market.
Yeah, and the willingness to adopt technology. I mean, it's the thing you talked about with previously with sometimes there's this belief that good technology, good products sell themselves.
Right.
But like, is the market actually ready to accept the technology solution is a question I would have.
Excellent question.
I love what you just said, Pete, about not only checking in with the growers that they say they're working with, but any other grower out there to see, would you be interested? Have you considered this? Is there anything there for you? Yeah, that's a really, really great point. Thank you.
Maybe like part question or more just statement. I was left very unsettled by that pitch because they started out with like, this whole industry's fucked and all these companies are going bankrupt, even the biggest ones that should be the ones who can scale this up and make money. And here's the software. And it didn't really tie that to like, here's how we're solving that problem. Here's how we're making these farms more profitable. And then it did get back to like, it seems like this check cashing thing is the big problem. And if you could just figure out how to do that at scale, that's maybe a way, like you were saying, a beachhead, but it's something that can be kind of tying in what you were saying. It's something that could be trialed relatively easily without disrupting the rest of their operations. And maybe it's like just that. Like it also gives me a little bit of PTSD. We had a client back in the day that they were doing like, it was a business management platform for a very specific type of business. And it started out with, oh, let's just do this feature, and then turned out into like 60% of a business management platform, which couldn't be adopted by anybody because it wasn't 100% of it. They couldn't actually replace any part of the system they were using. And they could have actually launched just one feature that wasn't really being done, and they could have done it, in a modular way that could have been an add-on and then kind of gone from there. But like, it's not, those things aren't really tying together for me in this. And maybe it is that I'm just not familiar with it, but I don't know if anybody else felt that way in the pitch.
No, I fully agree with you. It was, if you follow their logic, everybody should implement their solution and everybody would still go broke as a farmer.
Which might be true.
Yeah, it's true. It might be.
As a grower, that's why he's trying to diversify. Maybe just to tie these points together, my question is about whether it concerns you that, they won the AngelCon competition a couple of years ago, and they've been I think they've been trying to find the answer to some of these questions were surfacing for a couple of years, and maybe they're still not there yet. Does that concern you as you look at the trajectory?
It concerns me on two fronts. One is, this is the kind of thing where if they have the idea to do this and it's a good idea, then by definition in today's world, somebody else has that same idea. So they gotta be moving ahead. And then second, I always look at startups as they're kind of fruit, and they're either getting healthier or they're rotting. There's no staying still. So if you're not making forward progress, demonstrable forward progress, you're going backwards. And I've never seen them in the past. I have no prior knowledge, but other than they showed a few years of basically zero revenue, and that's fine. But I gotta kind of understand why they haven't made a little more progress than they have.
Good question. Okay, so we're going to move on to our third startup. Thank you, Pete, for hanging in there. One more to go.
Can I have a 30-second break?
Sure.
Good.
Great. So Andrew, you've got 10 minutes. As soon as you start talking, I will start the timer.
Hey. Good morning. Thanks so much for having me, everybody. I'm Andrew DeMille. I'm COO, co-founder of Quantum Energy, Inc., where we're helping large energy developers and large corporate buyers measure the true impacts of renewable energy projects so that they can get the right projects done faster and maximize the returns on investment. But we got a big problem. Would you be surprised if I told you that the majority of renewable energy projects are facing massive delays and even cancellations costing up to $16 million per project to these developers? Well, why is that? Why do we have nearly $2 trillion of renewable projects stuck in queue waiting to be deployed? Well, community opposition is on the rise. There's people that are very concerned about the public health, environmental, and economic implications of projects for their communities. And they cannot prove that these projects are going to benefit them. So permitters are stuck, not wondering where do I give these keys to? And projects are being stalled and delayed. That's one of the major causes these projects are delayed. So what's missing? We need a fast, affordable, credible way to quantify a full picture of emissions, carbon emissions that we hear so much about, and a whole host of others that cause real implications, and bring it to the fingertips of decision makers to make this process efficient and accessible to accelerate our clean energy transition. This is what we're bringing to the market. So Quantum's Total View Energy platform is funded by the National Science Foundation. We make it really easy to simulate a full picture of emissions, to quantify what are the public health, environmental, and economic benefits of a particular project, and how do you use that to communicate and align stakeholders to get these projects done and done faster. How do we make money? We're selling Total View software as a service and API with platform usage fees and a license fee. Based on our current customers and based on what we've been seeing from our interviews across a number of different segments, we anticipate $100,000 of average annual recurring revenue across energy developers, large corporations, financiers, the advisors, et cetera. It's a big industry, and we're starting with the developers. This market is huge. What's the potential? Have you heard of the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive? Okay, this is world changing. For the very first time in the history of the world, large corporations, 50,000 of which, 10,000 in the United States, are under the thumb of regulation that says you must measure your emissions and impacts to climate change, public health, our environment, biodiversity, water, for the first time. These are the emissions impacts that Total View is making accessible to the market for the first time at scale. We're also augmenting the carbon accounting market. So this is a part of our market to add this impact data layer beyond carbon emissions. This is where the market's going. I'll show you more in a minute. And we're looking to enable the $4 trillion worth of renewable projects that are expected to be built by about 1,000 large developers across North America and Europe between now and 2030. And again, I mentioned the National Science Foundation. The only reason they invested in quantum and the Total View platform is because it's a totally novel approach to energy modeling and the ability to capture these emissions at scale. That's the only thing they invested. High risk from a technical standpoint, high societal potential, and ability to deploy it at scale. So we're honored to have that award, and we've also worked with some of the largest, most prestigious scientific organizations on the planet. And with this much at stake, surely there's competitors in this space. We compete against some of the large energy analytics providers like Resurity and WattTime, and also Plexos, which is an industry standard model for high precision modeling, but none of them are able to capture this full picture of impact and do it affordably and effectively. We have a jump on the market. We have machine learning and AI algorithms that are making it better and more credible and faster over time. We're talking 10x more efficient and more data than what anybody else is able to provide to the market right now. So where are we today and where are we going? We had the honor to help greenlight the largest renewable project in the country. So as you can see here, we helped to quantify and to prove the value of this project. What are the public health benefits? Saving nearly 10,000 years of human life because of the reduced emissions this project will cause in its first year of operation. We're saving local species with this project in net. And then we're quantifying the economic implications for this community to make it easy for decision makers and those stakeholders involved to quantify the impacts and to make these projects happen. This is Billy Cordasco, the landowner of this largest project, who helped us get in the door and brought together 55 stakeholders across the industry with our analytics to support this project and moving forward. All right, so are we making money? Yes, we've got pilot projects and we've done 120 in sales in the last 6 months. This is founder-led. We've already touched on the largest US project. We also have a contract with the largest R&D provider for the global power industry with EPRI. They're adding Total View Impact Analytics to their flagship US 2050 Net Zero initiative so that the public health, ecosystem, and economic impacts are a part of our transition to a clean energy future. This is astounding. And then on the right, you see a distributed energy provider, a developer. This is electric power. They sell microgrids, and they're using Total View Analytics as sales enablement to help them to win key partnerships at the government level, starting with Los Angeles County right now. So how are we going to bring this to scale? So we've developed a relationship with the largest Clean Energy Buyers Association, the largest trade association, the Clean Energy Buyers Association. They've got over 400 large corporate buyers who buy 92% of the renewable projects in the United States. We were invited by the team at SEBA to help define the impact metrics and the standard by which the industry is going to rank and judge, buy and build these projects into the future. You'll see us right here alongside some very iconic brands, and they've already introduced us to one of their Fortune 100 clients, highly recommending us. We're now working on a pilot with somebody you all know and do business with, probably weekly. This is a really important piece of this puzzle to understand. Impact analytics are used to solve business problems between people. Okay, so when we provide impact analytics, these individuals use it to align stakeholders across the entire ecosystem. Let me show you examples of the doors that are opening already. Okay, so this is all in the pipeline. There's a lot of interesting stuff happening, and impact analytics organically create network effects because people use them to solve business problems between people. Our API is being designed to seamlessly fit in and add value and help 3 main categories win and differentiate their business by adding this impact data layer. Carbon accounting platforms, you probably recognize some of those. Renewable energy marketplaces and renewable energy credits all need this ability to quantify the value of what it is that they're doing with impact analytics. So how are we going to actually bring this to the world? Well, our vision and our mission is to bring it to the world yesterday. So going forward, this is what we're doing. We're building these relationships. We're adding value. And we already have the eyes and ears of some major potential acquirers. I'm not saying any one of these particulars is going to buy us, but I guarantee you that as we grow and we bring this to the market, any one of those is going to consider us an irresistible acquisition target. Are we the right team to do this? Absolutely. So my business partner, Dr. Daniel Howard, is a visionary with energy system modeling and the first individual on the planet to find a way to bring these environmental health and economic impact analytics to a system model that allows it to be done affordably and at scale. Myself, I've had the ability to launch a previous startup, to do fundraising, lead go-to-market to over 500,000 users. It was bought in 2017. Our now CTO, whom we now have since AngelCon, is amazing. Over a decade of experience in B2B software as a service and securing multiple patents for his previous company in the water and sustainability space. And last but absolutely not least, Dr. Rose Nash, who helped us to win the National Science Foundation SBIR grant, is now working on our phase 2, giving us an opportunity to win a $1.5 million in additional non-dilutive funds. All right, so what's the opportunity here? So we've already raised a pre-seed with Cerulean Ventures, an amazing climate tech VC. We've won the National Science Foundation first phase of $250,000, again, a $1.5 million that I think we've got a very good chance at winning. We currently have strong interest from a potential lead that's value aligns that invest in climate, health, and equity. And we also have one of our very own here, David Benham, putting together a special purpose vehicle called the Climate Impact Motivated Angels to make this opportunity more accessible to our angels to join, who are values aligned, see the writing on the wall of where this industry is going, and want to be a part of it. This $1 million will give us runway for approximately 18 months. Our goal is to hit $1 million in ARR. And depending on whether we win the NSF or it's time for a Series A, we anticipate that in about 18 months. So with that, if you see the opportunity to team up, if you feel the values of what this means to our future, to enable the clean energy future together, I invite you to join us. Again, I'm Andrew DeMille. I'm honored and grateful to be here with you, and I look forward to connecting with you. Please do feel free to reach out. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Andrew.
Thanks,
And
Andrew.
then Pete, go ahead.
Thank you, Pete.
Yeah. Hey, very interesting solution. I'm curious what your cost structure looks like. So as you deploy an incremental seat, do you have variable costs that goes with each added deployment?
Great question. So let me clarify where we're at and where we're going. The 120,000 is in, am I talking to you here?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can see you that way. So
Yeah, perfect. So good to see you, and thanks for making this available for us. So we're securing pilot projects using TotalView in-house, and then we're delivering them back to our clients. So essentially a software-enabled services model right now to prove the market, the model works, and NSF is paid for the automation of the underlying platform. We've taken the time to deliver from, when my business partner was doing his PhD, from years, hundreds of thousands of dollars, teams of scientists, terabytes of data, down to about a week. And by the end of this month, we're expecting to be able to deliver it in minutes. So that's really the opportunity. So once we're able to deliver the software, then it should be accessible and available to users to get the analytics in a matter of minutes with just 3 simple variables. They provide the location of a project, they provide the capacity, so it's say 100 megawatts, and what technology type it is, all through a drop-down or an API, and then we go ahead and deliver the impact analytics.
So is it fair?
Question?
Yeah, but let me just extend that. So is it fair to say once you get this new version deployed here in a month or so, your margins ought to go up to the 90+%?
I would think early on it might be more like 80%, but yes, over time it will scale, and we'll have. I mean, this is. I mean, in terms of, we don't know the unit economics exactly yet, but the model is so efficient that we expect to be able to run thousands of projects. I mean, for hundreds of dollars in Amazon compute costs. It's
okay.
mental. Yeah.
And then I thought I heard 2 distinct markets, different products, if you will, or services. The first is a service to get projects through the community approval process. And then separate from that, I heard kind of a compliance reporting for many different constituents to do their ongoing reporting. Am I right to think of it as 2 separate things?
You're absolutely on it. So the beachhead is through the developers.
Okay.
And the analytics. So here's the thing. The analytics provide value to the renewable energy developers to help them move their projects faster, more efficiently.
Yeah.
But in order to do that, you also need coordination with the buyers, right? So they're using this to justify internal decisions, especially in an environment where these power purchase agreements they're often upside down in their net present value. So you've got all these big players committed to hitting net zero and hitting their 100% renewable targets, and yet they're needing to pay up. They need to justify that with their boards, with their CFOs. And so they're using the same analytics or a subset of them to help them to justify it. And then on the buyer side, they need to be able to report on their emissions and impacts on an annual basis. So this is a recurring opportunity for TotalView to be able to automatically hand over the enhanced ESG reports to everybody involved on an annual basis. So it'll just keep running every single year into the future.
My next question is really about ultimate market size. If I understand correctly, you're selling per seat, or are you selling per organization, the 100K?
It's a good question. So right now we are planning on platform license fee for unlimited, within reasonable use limits, of course, unlimited ability to simulate future projects. This is a predictive model. One of the main things that this Fortune 10 client that I'm referring to, they want to be able to run future state scenarios to inform decision-making.
Okay.
It's in decision-making capacity, right? And then from there, I forgot, I lost my train of thought, but.
Well, what I'm trying to get to is, I clearly understand how you're bringing a lot of value to each of the situations, but it feels to me like if you're only getting 100K per organization, that it might be kind of a limited amount of value or limited market size.
Okay. Thank you for helping loop me back.
Okay.
So we anticipate 100,000 in average, but the platform license fee, so there's going to be a flat fee that gets everybody in to be able to run these simulations as much as you want. And then there's a usage component depending on how much energy you have under management for your reporting. So that part for a large buyer is going to scale up and to the right, and they're going to be negotiating enterprise deals that make it more reasonable. So that dollar amount's going to go up from there.
Okay.
But there's also, so one of the key pieces here in terms of how we're getting to the market, we need the analytics to be accessible. So we're testing out how do we allow these projects to get into the market at low barrier to entry so that people experience the value, and then it grows from there. So our best foot forward right now, a platform license fee and usage. In terms of the specifics on that business model, we've got learning to do, and different use cases will require a different business model. So the developers versus the buyers, et cetera.
Okay. Have you modeled out, depending on how that plays forward, the range and possible market size?
Yeah, so based on our estimates, probably $5 billion of potential market reach based on just the corporates and the developers. And then beyond that, there's interest from so many different areas. So government has interest. That first number on the first slide, that's an estimate of a tripling of renewable energy capacity globally by 2030. China doesn't care about these analytics, I don't think much at all. But North America and Europe absolutely do, and have regulations now that are bringing that together. But then there's also the advisory portion, right? So I'm in touch with the largest renewable energy advisor, Schneider Electric. They're interested in adding this as well. So using the same analytics, but there's use cases and value propositions across all of the different segments. We're just trying to stay focused on enabling the developers, and then they're taking it all over the place. And we got to figure out how to make it easy to monetize with the other segments.
So how many new development projects go on within the US in a single year?
Good question. So there's a number of different types, right? So at the utility scale, we're talking in the order of thousands of projects potentially. And that number, some people will say utility scale is 100 megawatts. Some people say it's 1. So it's a little bit fuzzy. But then there's also this distributed energy developer market, which I showed you with electric power, where there's a lot more volume. Right? So I mean, microgrids. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of volume there.
And again, your beachhead market is more on the approval process versus compliance and reporting, that ancillary service, correct?
That's right. And what's interesting though is, as we talk to the developers, what are they doing? Well, they're coordinating with their off-takers, the buyers, and sharing it with them too, saying, hey, this could help. Like Akamai Technologies as an example. We did a case study for Akamai Technologies to submit evidence to what's called, are you familiar with the Science-Based Targets Initiative?
Yeah.
Okay. So we jointly submitted this case study with an Akamai 18 megawatt wind farm and the analytics, saving something like 600 lives, $120 million in economic savings, along with Resurity, another analytics provider, and a major advisor of Fortune 500s called Sustainability Roundtable. So they're all kind of happening in parallel. We're just trying to stay focused in terms of our efforts to go to market through developers because they're very responsive right now. And we're also talking to buyers because they want it.
Okay, two last questions. One is, can you help me think of companies that are analogous to yours that have already scaled to some significant revenue level? So for instance, Salesforce is not analogous, right? They're more of an empty vessel piece of software where you have a lot of knowledge base built into your software. I'm just trying to imagine how big this can get by looking at other companies. That's
a really good question, and I wish I had a better answer for you right now.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, if you don't, you don't.
Yeah, it's a absolutely fair question, and it's a new category of analytics, right?
Okay.
This is kind of the first time where there's been a business need to have the ability to quantify impact, because until recently, let's just be honest, it's all been about economics, and nobody really cared. But now that it impacts economics, the industry's caring. So it's a new category.
Okay. My last question's around your go-to-market. It sounds like so far you've been able to interact with customers largely through sort of network effects. People are finding out about the solution from others, but longer term, how do you envision selling this, and what is your cost of sales as a % of revenue from that?
Yeah, so the Clean Energy Buyers Association is a critical go-to-market piece of our channel. So again, we have a relationship with the association. They're already actively recommending Quantum to their customers. So that's a big piece of our puzzle. We'll be back out to the in-person event in Denver in May. And that represents 450 large corporate buyers. There's at least 100 large project developers that are part of it, and ancillary service providers, many of whom can be channel partners with our API. So that's really a core part of our strategy in terms of getting to know these people, getting face-to-face and seeding the market. But beyond that, one of the aspects of this raise, we need to hire somebody that has a huge Rolodex in the energy industry who can pick up and go, hey, Pete, you got to see this. So that's going to be a part of it too, is an enterprise sales model with a small team to get our initial beachhead going.
Okay. Thank you, Andrew.
Work alongside me. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pete. I would love to get to meet you in person one of these days. I was so looking forward to having you here in person, but this is certainly next best, and I appreciate your time and support.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
All right, we'll have you lead.
Okay.
And without, give me the mic.
Thanks, everybody.
Perfect. All right, and then once Andrew's out, we'll start Q&A with Pete. And then just a reminder, everyone, the startups will come back after this. Yeah, you can ask them your questions. So who has questions? Who wants the box?
Hey, Pete, just wondering, out of all the potential opportunities that Andrew referred to, which one excites you most and why?
In terms of the end markets that he can go after?
Yeah, in other words, if you were in their shoes and this was your business, of all the business opportunities, which one excites you most and why from your analysis so far?
Well, I think it is well, I should have asked him more questions on this, to be honest, but what I was going to answer was it's the ability to help projects get approved. I know that is a massive pain point. What I should have asked him is, great, I understand you're a piece of helping something get approved, but you're just one thing. Like, I can imagine, if you're in a community approval process, they come in and they say, this is going to save 10,000 lives. And at the end of it all, somebody stands up and says, that all sounds great. I just don't want you building this in my backyard. And so the question there is, like, if this makes a difference in things getting approved, this is going to sell like hotcakes. But it strikes me that it's probably just one piece of the puzzle, and that it's not enough to kind of tilt the balance overall. I also have a question. In many other markets, there are now regulatory requirements that force reporting on corporations, and the corporations simply have no way to do it. If that is true here, that could make for a very easy sales process where corporations are just like, look, 100K, sign me up, baby, because it's just a way to meet the new requirement without having to do a lot of work. So that might make the corporate reporting market a better market.
So I find your question about the companies analogous to yours that have scaled. Walk me through the thought process behind your question there.
So ultimately, what I'm trying to figure out in pretty much any company that I'm looking at, where I'm assuming even if it's not now, but at some point in the future, it's going to need venture capital. Once you need that kind of money, venture capital can only come into a company when it thinks it can grow pretty significantly. And by pretty significantly, like it has a shot at going public if everything works well. But we all know the reality is most companies never get public. So what I'm trying to figure out, this is just a different way to say, how big is your market? And my hunch here is that this is a very interesting point solution that really isn't that big. The number of seats they can sell at 100K is probably pretty limited. I could easily be wrong on that. And that's why I'm asking for, if he could tell me Figma software is an analogous thing, and Figma today is worth $20 billion, and he can explain why the analogy holds, it just helps me understand why this could become, big enough to get public, a big end market, and therefore it will be worthy of venture financing, not necessarily right now, but when they get to that stage. Does that make sense?
On that note, I have a kind of a philosophical question. So here, Pete, we're with angel investors, right?
Yep.
We're training for angel investment strategies.
Yeah.
As an angel, sometimes the preferred, I think for the most part, exit would be, hey, they get acquired in 5, 7, 8 years, and I see an ROI fairly promptly, even if it's not the 100x exit,
Yep.
but maybe that's more kind of the expected model.
Yep.
So does that change your perception in that regard, as far as from an angel investor perspective versus a VC investor perspective?
So two comments there. One is, I've spent the bulk of my career running one of the larger venture capital firms. So, I'm sorry, but I'm biased to thinking as a VC. But the more direct answer is, it's absolutely fine if a company never wants to go down the path of raising venture capital, and it can get to an M&A exit where everybody's happy. Earlier on, what I would encourage you to do is just make sure you're aligned with the entrepreneur you're talking to. Like, what is the entrepreneur's goal that, I'm taking this thing public, go big or go home? Or is the entrepreneur thinking, yeah, as long as I can create some value for you, my investor, create some value for myself, and we sell in 3 years, everything's good. As long as you're aligned on that, that's fine. The one caveat is, certain companies just inherently will need more capital to expand, and they'll need it relatively soon. And once you talk about raising kind of more than 5 million in capital, you can't raise that. And by the way, I'm now an angel, so I'm no longer a VC. I'm in your shoes. But if the company I'm talking to is eventually going to need 5 million plus in capital, you can't get that from angels. You got to go to VCs, and then you have to have a much bigger expectation of outcome.
That's great. Yeah, thanks, Pete. Yeah. So sorry, back to questions relevant to potential due diligence on quantum.
I have another question, but somebody else has got one.
Hey, this has been great, by the way. Thank you so much. For quantum, what do you see as potentially the greatest risk area that in diligence, those of us who are looking at making an investment should focus on?
Sorry, first, just one more answer to Judy's question. By the way, I think Quantum is an excellent example of a company that can probably scale without needing tons of capital. So this is a great one for angels to go. You just want to know you're aligned with the entrepreneur. To me, it's really, does the entrepreneur fully understand what's going to get the customer to pay? And so at some level, I would want to talk to, people that are contemplating buying directly. Go talk to 2 or 3 of them, and hear from them what their pain point is and what they think the solution does, and does it really do that? I'm a little disturbed by like if they say that developers are the first market. So if they instead introduce you to somebody at British Petroleum that's just interested in producing a compliance report, well, wait a minute, that's not the scaling market. But if they can, they mentioned this wind developer, the largest wind project, I would physically want to talk to that person live and make sure they don't have any family relationship with the entrepreneurs, understand why they bought it. Understand, if I can, are they unique, or are there probably 50 other potential customers that look like them? That to me is the core issue.
Another great comment there about, is there a family relationship in this transaction? But yeah, some these things you don't necessarily think about when you're in due diligence. Digging in that deep, that's super important. Yeah. Was this a one-off, well, I got lucky because I have an insider scoop here, but yeah, cool.
Could I bring up one other point, Judy?
Yes, please. Yes.
Especially as an angel and in the current climate that we're in, venture capital has gotten much harder to get for companies in the last 2 years. So at all times, if I'm in your shoes and I want to understand, okay, fine, the company's raising $1 million now. What happens when that money is spent? How much more do they need to raise? Where's that money coming from? Do they have ability to go, if they're able to accomplish what they say, is it likely they're going to be able to raise more money? Or are they just going to keep coming back to the angels and asking us to invest again? And maybe that's not what we really intended.
Yeah, great. That's a good comment. Thanks, Pete. Well, holy cow, Pete, are you ready to do this again next year? Because this was great.
Sure.
Awesome. Thank
Hopefully
you so
in
much.
person. So.
Yes, that would be awesome. In person would be great. Thank you for your time and energy. And it's kind of great in the sense that you get a snapshot of what else is going on at the hot house versus what you're seeing through Cal Poly Ventures.
Yep.
So it's a nice comparative there for you. But thank you again for your time. Really, really appreciate it. And talk to you soon.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.